You know the can. You know the slogan, Red Bull gives you wings. But what if I told you the drink itself is just the tip of the iceberg? Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the absolutely massive business machine that little can has built. And trust me, how they really do it is going to blow your mind. And that brings us to the big question, right? What even is Red Bull? Are they just a beverage company with a truly insane marketing budget? Or are they actually a media and sports empire that just happens to sell an energy drink on the side? Well, let's look at the evidence. Most companies, they pay to slap a logo on a car. Red Bull? No, no. They own the entire team. In fact, they own two of them. That is a whole different level of commitment. And it doesn't stop with racing. They've got a whole network of 5 professional soccer clubs scattered across the globe, from Brazil to Germany, all the way to New York. This isn't just a hobby, it's a global, interconnected sports machine. And then, of course, there's this. The event that literally made the world stop and watch, sponsoring Felix Baumgartner's freefall from the edge of space. That wasn't an ad, you guys. That was a major global media event. So how on earth does a drink company pull all this off? All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at just how much more there is to them than the drink. Then, we'll uncover the secret of the 9-cent can that funds everything. After that, we'll see how they literally created a market out of thin air, dive into their incredible content machine, and finally, ask what the future looks like beyond those little silver cans. So to really get a handle on this whole empire, we have to start with the foundation, the thing that pays for everything, the drink itself. And that foundation, it is massive. In just 1 year, they sold 7.5 billion cans. I mean, try to wrap your head around that. That's nearly 1 can for every single person on the entire planet. That incredible volume is the engine that powers everything else we're going to talk about. So, how does that volume translate into funding F1 teams and space jumps? Well, that brings us to the absolute core of their entire strategy. I like to call it the 9-cent can secret. Get this. It costs Red Bull approximately 9 cents to produce 1 can. That's everything. The ingredients, the water, the aluminum can itself, just 9 cents. But they turn around and sell that 9-cent can to grocery stores and gas stations for around $1.87. That huge gap you see between what it costs to make and what they sell it for, well, that's where the magic happens. We're talking about a markup of over 2,000%. That incredible profit margin is the high-octane fuel that runs their Formula One teams, their football clubs, and their crazy space jumps. And you know how they do it? They use what's called a downstream business model. Basically, Red Bull doesn't actually own any factories or bottling plants. They outsource all of that boring stuff. This frees up every single dollar of profit to focus on one thing and one thing only: marketing. But hey, a huge profit margin doesn't mean anything if nobody's buying your product, right? So how did Red Bull convince the world to pay a premium for a type of drink that didn't even exist before them? Well, that's the story of how they created a market from scratch. So the whole story starts back in 1982. An Austrian marketing guy named Dietrich Mateschitz is in Thailand. He's dealing with some serious jet lag. He tries this local drink called Krating Daeng, which is just Thai for Red Bull, and it works. He's amazed. So he licenses the name, tweaks the flavor a bit for Western taste buds, and launches it in his home country of Austria 5 years later. But when he first pitched the idea, people thought he was nuts. I mean, there was no such thing as an energy drink category in the West. But Mateschitz had this philosophy that would define the entire company. If the market you want doesn't exist, you just have to create it yourself. And his plan to do that had 2 brilliant phases. First up was the grassroots phase. They didn't buy big TV ads. Instead, they hired popular college kids as brand managers to throw parties. They had these cool VW Beetles with a giant can on the back, driving around giving out free samples. They made it a must-have for bartenders. Then, once they had this cult following, they moved to phase 2, the spectacle. And that spectacle phase brings us to the Red Bull we know today. This is where they stop just advertising and start creating the entire story themselves. This is the Red Bull content machine. And the key idea here is something called story performing.
See, most brands do storytelling. They pay to put their logo next to an event or an athlete. Red Bull does the opposite. They create the jaw-dropping event, they own the team, and, this is crucial, they own all the media rights to the amazing content that comes out of it. The best example ever of story performing is the Stratos project, the space jump. They spent an estimated $50 million on it, which sounds like an insane amount of money, right? But the media coverage it generated around the world was valued at an estimated $6 billion. It might be the greatest marketing return on investment in history. So why do they do all this? Is it really just to sell more cans of energy drink? Well, that brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, the future beyond cans. This is where we see that this is about so much more than just marketing. The reality is, Red Bull has to do this because their main product, the drink, is facing some real risks. For one, its revenue growth has been slowing down. On top of that, people are way more aware of health and nutrition these days, which isn't great for a sugary drink. And maybe biggest of all, their entire business basically depends on this one product category. They know they need to diversify. And their soccer operation is the perfect example of this diversification in action. It's not just a collection of random teams. It's a pipeline. They can find a young, raw talent in Brazil, bring him to their Austrian team to get used to European soccer, and then have him play at the highest level for their top-tier German team. They're building a totally self-sustaining business around developing and selling talent, a business that in theory has nothing to do with the drink. But, and here is the final crazy twist in this story, after all of that, after building this massive, brilliant, expensive empire, look at this. So this day, the drink, the beverage sales still make up about 97% of their total revenue. The sports teams in the media house are still basically just a giant marketing expense. They're not really profitable independent businesses yet. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Red Bull spent decades using a 9-cent can to build a multi-billion-dollar media and sports empire. But is that empire actually strong enough to one day stand on its own 2 feet? Could it survive without the very drink that gave it wings in the first place? That is the billion-dollar challenge they're facing right now.